Hello and welcome to Me, the Wife and Wrexham AFC, a weekly podcast and YouTube channel discussing everything Wrexham from the point of view of long-term fans and brand new fans like my wife. So sit back, put your feet up, relax and let's get stuck in.
Hello and welcome back to a very special episode of Me, the Wife and Wrexham AFC. A couple of weeks ago, me and Ryan had the pleasure of speaking to ex-Wrexham legend Lee Jones, and this is how it went.
Okay, so welcome to Me, the Wife and Wrexham AFC, Lee Jones. Before we start, me and you have actually met in person a couple of times before. I would excuse you for not remembering because it was in about 1992, I think, that we actually met. Okay, I used to play for a local football team called Brickfield, and you came to our end of season sort of like awards, and you were the person who actually gave out all the awards. So I've got a couple of pictures with you. Also I was at a summer camp, for a football summer camp, which you came down to for one of the days. I've got a picture with you at that as well. Yeah, and as I say, that was about 30 years ago. So it's,
you're making me feel old now, to be fair.
I'm making myself feel old, to be honest.
It was funny because when I first went round to Ryan's house to meet his parents, I walked through their front door and then there was a picture of you and I was like, I know him. And then I realised it was like, oh, actually it's Lee.
Yeah.
Which was a bit bizarre.
So what we're going to do, I want to take you sort of like all the way back to the very start, and try and sort of walk you through the career that you've had. And because it all started for you at Lex, didn't it? Back in the day. And, because you didn't really play a lot of games for Lex, did you? And how did the move to Wrexham sort of come about from there?
It sort of evolved from school, really. I'd gone from school to Yale College, didn't do great in school, so ended up doing some resits in Yale College, and I actually ended up playing for the college team. I didn't want to play at the time. I played a load of football from sort of like you do as a kid from like ages of 8 through to like 16, 17. I just got to a point where I was a bit fed up with football, if I'm being honest. Went to college, thought to myself, I need to sort of knuckle down, get my results. And we had a PE teacher called Mr. O.M. Edwards, a local guy he was a fantastic teacher. And he pestered me basically to go to play for the college. I, at the time, didn't want to, but he was my PE teacher and PE was one of the resits. And he said, listen, if you do me a favour and play in one game, he said, obviously, your results at the end will reflect. It wasn't blackmail, but in a way, I thought it sounded a bit like blackmail, that. But anyway, cut a long story short, I ended up playing for the college team, and we ended up playing Lex in a semi-final at the Queensway. We won 5-0, I scored 4. And Cliff Sear happened to be down there at the time. And about a week after that, I'd played in the first team for Lex. So I'd only played probably 2 or 3 first team games for Lex under a guy called Graham Ozzy Jones. And the groundsman at Lex at the time was the Wrexham groundsman called Johnny Edwards. And Johnny Edwards had spoken to Cliff Sear, who was obviously the scout and sort of head of youth at the time at Wrexham. And said, listen, there's a lad playing for Lex. He's also playing for Yale College and he's playing at the Queensway. If you want to go down and have a look, go down. So anyway, he come down, obviously caught me on a good night, scored 4 goals and we'd won 5-0. And straight after the game, he said, we'd like to take you on trial. Would you be able to come to the racecourse on Sunday? So I said, yeah, fine, not a worry. It's 10 o'clock, wherever it was. And I went down there and it was bedlam. There was probably 20 plus in the home change room. I got put in the away change room with about another 20 players. Cliff came in and he named the first 11 from both teams. So I was in one of the first 11. Basically went onto the pitch, and from what I can recall, obviously it was a long time ago, but I only played for about 5 minutes. And Cliff Sear said, right, come off. And I thought, well, that's it. I've been there and I've obviously not done enough in 5 minutes to warrant anything. And he said, can you go up and see the manager? He sat in the director's box, Brian Flynn. So I was, oh, right, okay. Went up, seen Brian Flynn. And he said, listen, I've seen enough in 5 minutes to know that you're going to be a footballer. He said, and would you like to be an apprentice? He said, the only problem we've got is that apprenticeships are 2 years. He said, and we've only got one, which is a 1-year apprenticeship. He said, obviously, you've missed your first year. So if you come in, you've got a lot of work to do. So without hesitation, obviously, my hometown club, I was like, yeah, 100%. And that was in sort of, I think, the May. And then we reported for pre-season in July. And sort of, it took from there, it went from there, really. That's how I sort of ended up being an apprentice for the first sort of 12 months.
Yeah. I was trying to work out as well, because I went to the Arsenal game in '92, and I was trying to work out, because I was looking at sort of your career. Were you at Wrexham when that game was on? Because I remember you didn't play, but I wasn't quite sure if you were there.
Yeah, I played probably about 4 or 5 games leading up to the Arsenal game.
Okay.
In the league. And we were playing away at at Hereford on, I think it was the Boxing Day. And I got a heavy tackle, and I did something to my hip, and I just missed the game through injury. Obviously, I was sat in the stands with Mel Pedgick that day.
Yeah.
And obviously, the result and stuff was unbelievable. And we went on and we played West Ham in the next round, which I scored in.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was obviously disappointed that I got injured, but I had plenty of them. That was probably the beginning of things to come, if you like, in my career, because I got a few knocks along the way, which is what you do as a footballer.
Of course, and because it was 30 years ago, my mind was playing tricks with me, and I was thinking, I'm sure he must have been there for the Arsenal game, but I was, and I remember you playing in games around that time, and I was just trying to work it out.
Yeah, it was the first full season it was, and as they picked up the injury, so I'm disappointed. But then obviously when we got through, to be honest, when Mickey scored, myself and Mel, because I think Mel was cup tied at the time, but I said, can't believe it. I said, we've got a replay at Highbury.
Yeah.
Said, fantastic. And I said, I'm going to be fit. I'll be fit 100%, because it was only a knock, but just kept me out for that game.
Yeah.
And then within minutes, obviously Stevie Watkins gone and scored the winner, and it was absolute chaos there. It's something I'll never forget.
Was it a little bit of that must be a weird situation, mustn't it? Because on a sort of level of being part of a team, it's amazing. But 1 second you're thinking, I'm going to go and play at Highbury here. And then all of a sudden it's like the mixed emotions of going, oh, well, we're through, but I don't get to go and play at Highbury now.
Yeah, it was, yeah, like you say, it was mixed emotions, but we were sort of, as soon as obviously the final whistle went and we'd end up winning, straight away, my thought was, will we pull out another Premier League team or division? I think it was Premier League at the time, 92, was it?
Yes.
91, 92, so it was Premier League.
Yeah.
Obviously, Arsenal were top, we were bottom, so we couldn't have been any further apart in terms of, we were poles apart in terms of team and budget, etc. And yeah, it was just, and then obviously the draw came out, West Ham away, so it was like, oh, Upton Park, great, never been to Upton Park.
Yeah. And
it was another decent performance there, and obviously we got beaten in the replay, which was disappointing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, after a great season with Wrexham, you obviously got snapped up by Liverpool. Obviously, it was quite a big jump from sort of Wrexham's league up to the top division with a huge club like Liverpool. And, it's sort of every boy's dream to make that sort of leap up the divisions. But was there ever any part of you that sort of was in two minds about whether this was the right thing to do?
Yeah, well, it 100% it was, yeah. And I'll tell you one for why is at the time I wasn't a Liverpool supporter. I was a Man United supporter.
Right.
and to be honest, I wouldn't say I was forced to go to Liverpool. It was far from that. But the actual time that it happened, we'd played against Scarborough on the Tuesday and we'd won 2-0. And I'd scored, and Graham Souness was watching, and everyone knew that Graham was there watching Phil Hardy, because Phil was obviously left back. He was doing really well, playing at really high level, And I just happened to have a decent game that night. On the Wednesday, we were off on the Wednesday after the game, which was the norm. And then about 5 o'clock, I happened to be at my girlfriend's house, and about 5 o'clock, my mum phoned up and said, "Can you come back to the house? The chairman and the manager are here." And I thought, well, what have I done? Because you never saw the chairman unless you were in trouble. It was that kind of, and the manager was, Wednesday, wouldn't see him because obviously Brian was living in Burnley as well. So I thought, strange. I was in Roseley, so I ended up running back home, got into the house, and they were both sat there with a cup of tea, talking to my mum and dad. And he said, "Oh, you better take a seat." He said, "I've got something I need to speak to you about." And I still hadn't got a clue what it was. So I was still sort of a bit fearful. I thought, was he going to sack me? Or because I just couldn't figure out why. And he said, "Listen," he said, "we've had an offer for you. And it's a lot of money." He said, "It's £300,000. And he said, "It would be a massive benefit to the football club if you went." And he still hadn't told me the team. So no, I was like, right. He said, "Because obviously we're in a little bit of financial trouble. We don't want you to go, and we're not forcing you to go, but will you consider going?" And I still didn't know the team. So I was like, well, yeah, because Wrexham had given me my chance. I was a Wrexham lad. I used to live sort of half a mile away from the ground. Wrexham was a team I supported as a kid. And all I wanted to do was make sure that Wrexham Football Club was in a safe place, if you like. So I said, yeah. I said, "Oh, if you need me to go, I'll go." And he said, "Okay." He said, "It's Liverpool." And I was a little bit, oh, right. And I've got to be honest, I was a little bit not sure then. And he said, what are your thoughts? I said, "Well, obviously it wouldn't be my first choice, Gaffer." I said, "Because, I'm Man United supporter." I said, "But if you need and want me to go." He said, "No, I don't want you to go, but, he said, "We think it'd be good for you." So I said, okay. So that was at 5 o'clock. At 6 o'clock, I was having my medical at Liverpool. I watched Liverpool against West Ham that night at 7:30, sat next to Kenny Dalglish. And it was just surreal. There was obviously, it's not that you don't get the media coverage that you do now, but I was sat in the director's box, and there was like photographers all like sort of looking up and photographing me. The TV were there. I say I was on a different level 30 years ago, but it was still, people were like, who's the lad, and et cetera, et cetera. I then actually played, I came on actually in the reserves the night after. We were playing Coventry away in the reserves, and I came on in the last minute for Ian Rush, who coming back from injury. I never forget it. I went round the keeper, tight angle, hit the post. I thought, I was on for him, and that was the only kick that I had. I came into the change rooms after, and Phil Thompson said to me, "Son," he said, "if you can't score that, get yourself back to Liverpool. I'll speak to the gaffer tonight. We'll rip your contract up, and you can go back to Liverpool tomorrow. You can go back to Wrexham tomorrow." And I thought, oh, he's joking. But he wasn't. He was deadly serious. He said, "That's not good enough for us." And I was a little bit, oh, right, okay. And that was on the third. That was on the I think it was the Thursday night. I think it was Wednesday or Thursday. On the Saturday, I was playing in front of 35,000 in a reserve derby against Everton.
Yeah.
So I've gone from playing against Scarborough in front of 3,000 people, whatever it was, to playing at Coventry reserves a minute, to playing in this Merseyside derby, and the biggest crowd that I've ever played in front of 30,000+, and it was just surreal. It's just the week sort of blew me away, really.
Yeah.
But I've said to many people, and I've done many podcasts as well, the first 6 months I absolutely hated it there. Yeah. And every day I just wanted to go back and rip the contract up and sign back for Wrexham, because I just didn't enjoy it. So
you mentioned Graham Souness then. Now, I've heard a lot of stories about Graham Souness and his management style, shall we call it. He's a bit of he's a bit of what you imagine he is. He's quite hard-faced, but did you have any sort of relationship with him? What was he sort of like?
No, I mean, obviously I'd gone from a club at Wrexham. We had Brian Flynn, Kevin Reeves, Joey Jones, Brian Prandall, Idris Price, Cliff Sear. So 6 really good people. All had their different strengths. You know, some would kick you up the backside, some would put their arm around you, but it was always, you know, the player. They made you feel the best player in the world. Every day at Liverpool was constantly they hit you on the top of the head with a stick. It was just whatever you did, it was never good enough. And Graham was there for around 2.5, 3 years that I was there, and he spoke to me twice in just about 3 years. And I mean, speak to me as in the day I signed. That was the first time he spoke to me. And he spoke to me when he said on a Friday morning, he said, I want, this was after 2 years, he said, I want you to go on loan to Crewe. And I said, oh, to be honest, Gaffer, I don't want to go. And he said, I'm not asking you. He said, you're going, and you're going now. He said, are you playing tomorrow? So I'd walk past him in the corridor, and it wasn't just me, but if you went in the first team at Liverpool, you don't think it's spoken to.
Right.
So Graham would walk past you in the corridor, and it was like he was walking down the corridor and there's no one else there. He'd just blank you completely. And I was a little bit, that's a bit strange, but obviously, like I said, I wanted to go back to Wrexham. The best bit of advice, and again, from like a father figure, he was like a second dad to me, was Joey Jones.
Yeah.
And Joey said to me, listen, Lee, he said, they're just testing you out every day. He said, they're testing your character, they're testing your mentality. He said, they want to see if you're a quitter, you know, and you wanting to knock the door and say, right, I'm done. He said, you pretty much, you know, fall into their hands. He said, you've got to go and prove them wrong. He said, work harder. He said, be fitter, be stronger, do everything that they're not expecting you to do. He said, and you'll come out the other side. And it was the best advice that I had, because I was sort of last in at the training ground and I was first away for the first 5 or 6 months. And then when I spoke to Joey, I made sure that I was first in. And then in the afternoons, I would do extra bits. I wasn't the biggest, so I'd go in the gym and do the weights. I'd do work on my touch, I'd work on my finishing, all that kind of stuff. And over that period of time, over the next 6 months, or the 6 to 12 months, I sort of became a regular in reserves, scored goals, and then I had a few sort of appearances on the bench and stuff. So it was invaluable, the experience that Joey had already at Wrexham, and helped me out massively.
Do you, with your career, your long career, do you have a favourite manager? Has there been a favourite manager?
Yeah, Brian Flynn. Brian Flynn was fantastic. And again, like I say, you could go out on the pitch with Brian and you sort of knew that you hadn't had a really good game, but he'd make you feel like you were the best player on the pitch. When I went on, you know, off the bench, Brian would say, you know, you're going to score today, and he would give you that belief, you know. So the actual staff, and it wasn't just Brian, it was Kevin and Joey, and as I say, Brian Pramdell, Idris Price, and Cliff Sear. They were a collective, you know, and it was just a pleasure to work with. The other closest one that I had to that was Dave Bassett, the ex-Wimbledon manager when I signed for Barnsley.
Yeah,
very good man manager, you know. But I would say sort of the other managers that I had weren't great in terms of man management. It was more results rather than, you know, what. And again, you used to get hit on the head by other managers as well. I was probably a player that if they put their arm around me, they'd probably get the best out of me. You know, different characters with different managers. But
do you think that the way that managers are now to managers when you were obviously playing, do you think they are, I mean, obviously I know managers are different, but do you think their management styles are a lot different as time's gone on?
Yeah, 100%, because years ago, the managers at the football club held all the cards. It's not now, it's the players.
Yeah.
So, you know, if I'd have ever knocked on the manager's door when I was just breaking into the team at Wrexham or Liverpool and said, why aren't I playing? They'd just go, just get out.
Yeah.
Get out. Now, if a player knocks on the door and says to the manager, why aren't I playing? If the manager doesn't give him an explanation, the first thing the player will do, he'll go to his agent. His agent will go to the press and say that he's being treated unfairly, and it becomes a massive storm. So the power over the course of the last 30 years has shifted completely, and it's the players now. The players rule the roost, you know, and that's why they command such big, you know, salaries, you know, and God forbid anything is said against them by a manager or a member of staff at the football club, it just brings a football club down. So the power shifted massively.
I'm always intrigued about sort of like ex-players. You obviously see the money that's in the game now compared to what it was in the days when you were playing. Do you sometimes feel a bit aggrieved that you maybe played 20, 30 years too early?
You do, but I remember it when I was playing. So obviously, the amounts of money that's going around in football now, and I mean, you can get a bog standard average player playing in the Championship for 30,000-40,000 pound a week.
Yeah,
I went to Liverpool, and Ian Rush was the top paid player in the Premier League, £10,000 a week.
Yeah,
that was the deal. So I could say, oh yeah, I'd be gutted, but I was never Ian Rush.
no.
I look at it and say, well, can you imagine? Listen, everyone likes money, and everyone wants to be paid for the job that they're doing. If they're doing it well, they get the sums of money, which is fine. But because I've had that asked to me loads of times, I'd say, yeah, of course I'm gutted, because if I was playing now, I'd probably work 12 months and never have to work again.
Yeah.
But can you imagine how Ian Rush felt, how John Barnes felt, how, if you look back even further, George Best, how they were getting, they were on £5 a week, and all of a sudden Ian Rush is on £10,000 a week. Now you look at Ronaldo's on a £500,000 a week.
Yeah.
It's madness, but. And again, I've always said it, if someone says to you, there's £500,000 a week, you're not going to say, oh, no, I'm not worth that.
Yeah.
You just don't. So you go with whatever they think the value is.
When you went to Liverpool, what was your sort of mentality when you got there? Were you sort of thinking, not in an arrogant way, but were you sort of thinking, I've made it, I'm here?
Not really, no, because I knew the way that Liverpool operated, because again, I spoke to Joey, I spoke to Brian Flynn, and I knew that I was signing from Wrexham to Liverpool, and I knew I wasn't playing in their first team straight away, because that was just never done. Liverpool had a process of what they would do. They would bring in young players, they'd put them in the reserves, and over time they'd drip feed them into the football club and into the first team. And it was only on the real odd occasion, if there was a special player there, that they would get into the first team and sort of bypass the reserves. So I always knew in my mind that and also I knew that I wasn't good enough, because within a week of going to Liverpool and watching the training at Liverpool and being involved in it, I just knew I was miles away from even being anywhere near the first team. So I wasn't blinded enough to say, well, why aren't I playing? Because I didn't warrant it. I just knew that I was sort of a project for them. And over time, hopefully I would get better, whether it be 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, however long it took. I knew I'd get into the first team, but it was more of a long drawn process than rather than knowing that I'm going to get in there straight away.
I wanted to talk about injuries, because you sort of touched on it before. Because you broke your leg. Now, I haven't made a note, but I'm going to try and test my knowledge here. I know it was in a reserve game, and I think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, was it against Sunderland reserves that you broke your leg? And then you were out for quite a while after that, weren't you? And I'm always interested to know, at the point when you broke your leg, did you feel then that you were making some progress, and then it was just sort of a bit of a brick wall for you when that came?
I mean, my career at Liverpool was blighted by injury so I signed in the March. In pre-season in July, I tore my Achilles tendon, so I was out for 4 months.
Yeah.
Well, the plantaris tendon that runs alongside your Achilles, I tore that. And then I ruptured my thigh. My thigh muscle came off the bone, so I was out for 5 months with that. Then I broke my right leg. Just as I was getting in and around the first team, I'd scored a lot of goals for the reserves, and I was playing in a reserve game at Anfield, and we were 2-0 up after 5 minutes. I've scored 2, and I'm absolutely flying. I'd already scored a load of goals. There was talk of me getting into the first team, and I was playing really well. And funny enough, there was a centre-half at Sunderland called Gary Bennett. Big centre-half, 6'4", big unit. And within sort of a minute of me scoring my second goal, he said, next time you get it, son, I'm breaking your leg. And I was like, yeah, okay. I thought, he's not even quick enough to catch me, so I'm not bothered, 2 minutes after that, I think it was 8 minutes gone, he broke my leg just below my knee. So he cracked my fib. So I was out for, I think I was out for about 13, 14 weeks with that. So that was a major setback because I'm very close to getting into the first team. And I think I would have probably, because I'd been on the bench, I think I'd have probably made a couple of appearances. But again, it's just a fact of life, you know, you pick up injuries. It was one of them. I feel disappointed about that because it wasn't something that I had done. It was something that someone else had done to me. So I was just disappointed, but it's football.
Yeah, it is, and it is unfortunate, because like you said, you had a few injuries, and it always seemed, because back in Wrexham, we were always watching what was going on with you because we were interested, still, even though you weren't our player anymore, it was still interesting to see how you were getting on. And it always seemed like you were starting to get somewhere, and then there was something else that came along and sort of knocked you back. As a professional player, what is it like being on a long-term to have a long-term injury and see everyone around you sort of carrying on to develop, and you're just sort of sat back and not able to do it? I mean, how does that affect your sort of mental health?
It's difficult because obviously, at the end of the day, we train in the week, and sort of your reward at the weekend is playing.
Yeah.
So it's almost like when you're doing your rehab every day, you're rehabbing. So obviously you're not doing any ball work or doing anything in terms of, like, for instance, when I broke my leg, I spent hours in the pool, I spent hours in the gym. So you know that there's no reward at the end of the week for you. So it's a bit mundane. So you'd be in the gym from 9 o'clock in the morning. You'd have treatment at lunchtime. You'd be in the gym in the afternoon or the pool, and then you'd have treatment last thing in the afternoon, and then you'd be at home, and that would be every single day. You don't get a day off when you're injured either. So it gets a bit mundane. If it's a long-term injury, which I had several, it becomes quite difficult. And in terms of years ago, obviously you didn't really think about mental health, but it can be quite sort of damning when you're every single day you're doing the same mundane thing. I mean, people say, "Oh yeah, but it's still a great life and stuff." Every day is exactly the same, and you're watching players do what you want to do. The flip side of it as well is that if you're injured, there's always someone then that they're looking to bring in and replace you. So when I was at Liverpool, when I first went there was Ian Rush and Dean Saunders. When I was in the reserves after 2.5 years, Robbie Fowler came through. Then I got my injury, and Robbie flew and went through, did really well. The back end of my Liverpool career, Michael Owen come through. And obviously, I'm there looking at that then, and everyone knew that Michael Owen was the next best thing. We'd obviously done really well in the World Cup and stuff. So it's difficult because every day's the same. You're working, trying to get to your end goal, but then you're looking and saying, well, Michael Owen's here now, Robbie Fowler's here now. Stan Collymore, for instance, was signed, because that's what football clubs do. They can't wait for somebody to be fit. They'll just, we'll bring him in. He might never return back from injury. So it is tough, but you just got to get on with it. It's part and parcel of being a footballer,
You had sort of a couple of loan spells back to Wrexham during your time at Liverpool. I was interested to know how that feels, because you've made that move from Wrexham to Liverpool, and you've taken that step sort of forward to a big club. Now, obviously you love Wrexham, you're from Wrexham, but how does it sort of feel like you're taking a step back to where you came from a little bit, or is it not that? Are you taking a step back to take a step forward again?
Yeah, I would say it was more that, because I had probably on every period that I went out on loan, I had probably about 4 or 5 clubs that I could have gone on loan to.
Yeah.
And the reason that I chose Wrexham was it felt really comfortable. So I still knew the manager, so I knew how Brian Flynn operated, and again, how all the staff. So I knew that if I went back, and I think I come back to Wrexham 3 times on loan, and each time I came back, I knew I was a better player each time that I came back than I was when I left. So I obviously knew that I could help the team first and foremost, but it was very easy for me to settle in. Whereas I had an offer, from Ipswich, from Norwich, and I turned them down because I just thought to myself, well, if I go there and I don't hit the ground running, I'll be back at Liverpool within a month. So I always thought to myself when I came back to Wrexham that, there was an opportunity that I could hit the ground running because I knew the environment. So it was easier for me to make that transition back into first team football. And ultimately, it was just to get games under my belt to then sort of further my career at Liverpool. That was the end. That was the end goal.
I mean, you had a short loan spell with Tranmere, which resulted in a permanent move away for what was still quite big money at the time as well when you moved to Tranmere. And you spent 3 years there. Was that? I know you were playing regularly at Liverpool, maybe not on the front line as it were, but in the reserves you were playing regular. But was it nice being at somewhere like Tranmere? Did you enjoy Tranmere sort of playing regular first team football again in a way?
Yeah, because I mean, my contract was up at Liverpool after 5 years, and they'd offered me a new 2-year contract. I'd played 5 times for the first team in 5 years, and all I wanted to do was play first team football. But yeah. I sort of knew deep down, obviously Michael coming through, and I thought, I'm not really going to play. Robbie Fowler was still there. Michael Owen was there. There was talk of Karl-Heinz Riedler coming in. So there was Jari Litmanen. There was like 4 or 5 different players. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm not going to play. And I need to maybe take a step down to go forward. I had lots of clubs abroad that I could have gone on a Bosman. And again, I had Norwich, Ipswich, a couple of clubs in Scotland. Wrexham actually came back in for me as well, and Tranmere. So when I went on loan, I looked at obviously I knew John Aldridge was obviously ex-Liverpool, and people had spoken quite highly about him, and he was getting things going at Tranmere. I thought, well, it's not a million miles away from where I live, etc. So I thought, I'll go there for a month. And I was there for about 6-8 weeks, I think it was. But again, as soon as I walked through the door, it felt like Wrexham. It was like a really, good club, community club. Everyone was fantastic around the ground, from the stewards, the tea lady, all that kind of stuff. It was fantastic. And I did really well there. I scored 6 in 8 games on loan. And then I had a decision to make where I wanted to go. And Tranmere came to me with a 3-year contract. I was still sort of undecided up until the last game that I played for Tranmere on the loan spell was against Bolton. Last game of the season, and there was about 16,000 there. And the sort of thing that clinched it for me was after the game, a guy came up, a supporter, and he gave me like this A4 pad. And I thought, what's that sort of thing? So he gave it to me. He said, this is for you. And I said, oh, what is it? And he said, if you open it, he said, them are all the supporters that want you to stay at the football club. And there was thousands, and he'd gone round and got thousands of fans to sign this book. And I'm the last podcast that I did, I said, I have got it somewhere in the house. I'll have to find it, because that was the thing that sort of tipped me to sign for Tranmere, because I was sort of thinking that I might go to Belgium or Holland and play abroad for a couple of years.
Yeah.
But I'd obviously done well at Tranmere, and then when I was given this, I thought, do you know what? I think I owe these fans something, because they seem a very good club. So I ended up signing there for 3 years, which the first 12 months were fantastic. Don't get me wrong. It was probably the most, apart from Wrexham, I'd ever enjoyed my football, playing every week and scoring. And after that, it went quite sour.
I mean, I remember you play. There's one game I remember you playing for Tranmere, and it was against Bolton, and it might be the game you were just talking about there, where you were 2-1 down, and you scored in the last minute, and it was on Sky Sports. I remember you running off and taking your shirt off and going a bit mad. Was it that game?
I cringe at that now. Cringe at it. I was like, oh my God.
So was it that game?
It was that particular game. So yeah. Bolton needed to win. Bolton needed to score 2 goals and beat us to be the first team in history to get 100 points and 100 goals.
Yeah.
So they were 2-1 up with a minute to go, and I ended up scoring an equaliser, which meant they only got 98 points.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the game. So after that game, when I was up in one of the lounges, a fan came up to me and said, "This is for you."
Yeah.
And he gave me this, and I was a bit blown away. I was like, oh God, we'd gone around the ground and got thousands of people just to sign. It's just saying, please stay, please stay. So that's why I ended up staying.
See, fans are amazing though, and I think a lot of people don't realise how important fans are to a club, and it's little things like that.
It is. It's huge. Obviously, the Wrexham fans are exactly the same, And again, when things are going well for a football club, you see the fans at their best. Obviously, there's going to be times of turmoil, and fans will get on your back. I suffered loads of abuse at Wrexham when I first broke into the first team. They probably targeted me a little bit more because I was a local lad, so which is fine, and I get that, and I'm sure other clubs and other players, if there's local players, 9 times out of 10 you normally get a little bit of leeway if you're a local player, but sometimes you don't. I was one that didn't, so.
So you said it went a little bit sour after an initial 12 months. So in what way did it sort of go sour for you?
Basically, I had an agent at the time who did the deal for me from Liverpool to Tranmere, and I'd signed this 3-year contract, and the money was fantastic. And it was the second year that I was there, so the pre-season, and I'd done all the pre-season with Tranmere. And then on the Thursday, we were playing Wolves away on the Saturday, first game of the season. I was playing, myself and David Kelly were playing up front. We got to Molineux, so we're there at 1:45, and John Aldridge came in. He said, listen, he said, just to let you know, he said, Lee, you're not playing. He said, and there was a guy called Alan Mann. He said, Alan, you're playing. And I'm like, what do you mean I'm not playing? He said, I'm not speaking to you now. He said, come and see me Monday morning. And I was like really irate because I'm thinking, what's gone on? You can't just drop me an hour before. And all the players like, what you doing? I'm not just called him Aldo. What you doing, Aldo? He's playing. No, he's not playing. Can't discuss it, but we'll see you on Monday morning. So I went in Monday morning, and the long and short of it was that the agent who was working for me had already done a deal with Jeffrey Richmond at Bradford, and the chairman at Tranmere had agreed to sell me with my agent, but no one had told me, and no one had told John Aldridge. So when I went in on the Monday morning to speak about it, John Aldridge then said, I can't trust you anymore because you're doing a deal behind my back, so you'll never play for me again. I'm like, well, I've not done anything. I said, it's my agent. And we never really got over it. Right. I did end up playing another 20, 30 games, whatever it was for Tranmere, but I think it broke down because he never sort of trusted me from then. And you need trust as a player and a manager, and I totally get it because obviously I'm on the other side of it now. But at the time, it was something that wasn't my doing. I sacked my agent straight away. I said, I don't want anything to do with you anymore if you're doing that to me. And it was a difficult situation to be in because I'd gone from really enjoying the football for 12 months, and I think I would have carried on enjoying it.
Yeah.
But to then just sort of be left out in the cold, I was playing in the reserves. They play me in the youth, not like the training with the kids. It's no, you're not training with the first team, you're training with the kids today. And they sort of punished me for something that I hadn't done. But again, it's football, it happens at every training ground, every day of the week. Bit different now, because if that had happened now, the first thing I would do is go to my agent and I'd make sure there was a press release against the football club saying that this is how I've been treated. 30 years ago, you didn't dream of doing stuff like that. No. So you went to Barnsley after Tranmere. So what was your time at Barnsley like? Yeah, again, enjoyed it. I was there I signed a 3-year contract with Dave Bassett. Enjoyed certainly the first 6 months, went in, scored goals for them, was playing regular. And then Dave Bassett left because of health reasons after about 6 months. Nigel Spackman came in, who was obviously former Liverpool, and I knew of Nigel, and he was very good. Sort of a manager that was ahead of his time, if you like. So tried to change things probably a little bit too quick in terms of the food and the hydration. I mean, for instance, we would train and we would get weighed first thing in the morning, and for every pound that you lost through body fluid, you had to replace with a litre of water. So, for instance, you could lose £4 or £5 easily at a training session. but you couldn't then leave the training ground until you drank 5 litres of water. Try drinking 5 litres of water. I was then driving home 2 hours from Barnsley back to Chester. Every 20 minutes, I was stuck out the side on the toilet, and I said, "This it's not right. We can't drink 5 litres of water." But that was how we did it. Then he brought in supplements, so different pills and all these different things, vitamins, and it was just, you look at it now, it's the norm. It's the absolute norm now. But years, 30 odd years ago, it was like, why are we drinking water? Why am I taking vitamins? Why am I doing this? Why am I having an ice bath? Don't want an ice bath. No, you've got to have it because of this. It's the norm now. It's, everything is that way. But he was a little bit ahead of his time, Nigel, but very good manager.
Yeah.
But unfortunately for him, results took a bit of a downward turn. And then Steve Parkin came in, who's obviously the Wrexham assistant manager now. And I can honestly say me and Steve never sort of saw eye to eye.
Okay.
And I'm not going to say it on here because it's a Wrexham FC podcast, but all I'll say is that he did some things that weren't very nice.
Right. Okay.
To me as a professional footballer, which, but, that's by the by, it's gone. I don't hold no grudges. I met him when he was at Bolton, soon after he'd gone there and I'd left and gone back to Wrexham, I think it was. And, like I say, I don't hold any grudges. But at the time, it was a difficult situation. Yeah. But it's football.
Yeah. So you ended up back at Wrexham after that, and there's one game I remember going to one game. Now we were fighting relegation with Cambridge, I think Notts County maybe as well, around that time. Now one game I remember may not be, it's sort of, again, it's a bit bittersweet because we beat Cambridge 5-0 at home, I remember. But unfortunately, because of other results, we were going to get relegated that season. But I remember you scoring all 5 goals in that game. So I think the question is, scoring all 5 goals in a league game for your hometown club must be quite special. But is there one game that sort of sticks out in your mind as, that was my best game?
Yeah, it was bittersweet because we didn't know we got relegated till we got back into the change room. So I remember holding the ball. I was Les Evans, he was obviously the photographer.
Yeah.
And I remember holding the ball and then walking into the change rooms, and it was just deathly silent. And I thought, what's gone on? So we've been relegated. So it was a little bit, right. So we'd gone from being, elated to like being deflated within the space of like a couple of minutes. So that was difficult. I think the one that, obviously my debut stands out for me more than any other game against Man United in the Cup Winners' Cup. 17-year-old being told at 10 o'clock in the morning that you're playing against Man United tonight in Europe, was a surreal thing. Didn't probably have the best of games because we're playing against Man United and it was my first ever game. But as a moment, running out in front of a packed Kop, packed stadium. I think there was about 14,000 there that night. It was just fantastic. It was a boyhood dream, come true. So that was probably the game that stands out, even though it didn't probably play as well. And I can remember. I can't even remember much that went on that night. So, I remember getting severe cramp with about 10 minutes to go. I know that, and I've never felt pain like it. But it was a surreal moment, that.
I mean, with talking about Wrexham, I mean, I was having a look before we did this at some of the players that you played alongside, and the list was amazing. I mean, we're talking like, Mickey Thomas, Joey Jones was there, obviously, Trundle, Morel, Brian Hughes, these are all players that you'd played alongside. Kevin Russell, Steve Watkin. I mean, you could just go on and on and on, and you could probably, out of the players you played alongside, if I was asking you to name your best 11, you could probably name 3 teams, with the players you played alongside. What was there one player, either at the time or when you look back, that you just felt was that sort of cut above everybody else that you played with?
At Wrexham, yeah, certainly. Darren Ferguson.
Yeah.
Darren Ferguson was obviously, and again, the pedigrees I'd playing at Man United. I'd obviously been at Liverpool, and then when I signed back for Wrexham in the promotion year, and I played alongside Darren, I just knew anywhere on the pitch that I made a run, he would find, if he had the ball, he would find me. It was sort of sometimes telepathic, you know. So he was certainly a cut above. But the promotion year, obviously, I would say sort of Andy Morrell and Truns that year, and Carlos Edwards were unplayable. You know, they were unbelievable that year, and sort of, you know, push us to promotion. Obviously, Andy's goals, but we had a bit of everything. You know, I look at Wrexham's team now, and I don't think it's too dissimilar from the team that we had. You know, it's obviously we had big Brian Carey at the back with Andy Dibble, loads of experience with Darren Ferguson, big Dennis Lawrence, and then you had the youngsters like Steve Roberts, Sean Pedgick. You know, we had quality up front. You know, Truns and Andy Morrell. There was myself and Hector. If you midfielders, Darren Ferguson, if you compare them to what we've got now at Wrexham with the likes of Tozer and Young and Mullin and Palmer, I don't think the team now is too dissimilar in terms of its makeup, you know, to what we had then. There's goals all through the team.
Yeah.
You know, if Mullin's not scoring, Palmer's scoring.
Yeah.
Morrell wasn't scoring, Trundle was scoring. It was that's how it is, and you know, I think that's what makes me think this year that, you know, it's our year.
Do you think it's genuinely our year this year?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I've got to be honest, I've not been to a first team game at Wrexham just because of my job. I haven't been for probably 2.5, 3 years.
Yeah.
I've watched probably 6 or 7 games on the TV. And every time I've watched them, it just takes me back to our promotion winning year. The makeup is very strong. So like I said, if Mullin's not having a particularly good game, Palmer will score. You know, there's goals from midfield. You know, you've got a centre half that scores 8 or 9 goals. That was Brian Carey and big Dennis Lawrence. You know, there's just, and they keep clean sheets. You know, Andy Dibble kept a number of clean sheets for us. So I think the comparisons are quite scary. But, you know, it's going to be a tough second part of the season. But I just think that Wrexham have got too much. They've got too much firepower. And I also think the thing that's going to help them get over the line is the fans. Yeah. You know, they're selling at every home game. No disrespect to the likes of Notts County and Chesterfield, but it's not even in the same league. You know, it's chalk and cheese. And I think the fans will certainly drive them on. You know, I obviously listen to interviews and stuff that the players and the manager are having, and the first thing they say is how good the fans are. Yeah, which is fantastic. You know, don't get me wrong. If they're not playing well, 10,000 Wrexham fans will let you know they're playing well.
I'm terrible at the game.
That's it. I mean, you know, but listen, it's going to be a bit of a roller coaster between now and the end of the season. But I firmly believe that we've got too much not to go up this year. Yeah, you know, I'd be very, very, very surprised if we don't. Yeah.
So when you were reaching the end of your career, was there an element of panic, thinking like, what am I going to do next?
There was and there wasn't really, because when I finished playing at Wrexham, I was 32 when I finished playing professionally, which is relatively young, you know, but I'd had a load of injuries. I had a couple of offers from a couple of teams in Scotland, York City, Carlisle, I think Doncaster. I had 7 or 8 teams that wanted me to carry on playing. But I sort of, at the time, I'd had my eldest now, he's 23 now, but at the time he was only 2 at the time. And being at Barnsley before I come back to Wrexham, I'd missed probably the first 18 months of him growing up.
Yeah.
So didn't see a lot of him, and you never get them moments back. And I sort of made the decision, because I always wanted to stay in football, but I didn't know in what capacity, whether it would be a coach, whether it be a manager, a scout, assistant, however it was, but I always wanted to be still involved. So what I started doing was working at the Centre of Excellence at Wrexham, got my coaching badges, and I sort of set myself, when I finished playing, I made the decision that I was either going to go down the coaching route or I was going to carry on playing. And obviously I spoke to my wife and I said, if I go out of football now, I won't get back in. It's 32. I can't do coaching for 2 years and then think I'm going to get back into professional football 34, 35. It just doesn't happen. So decided I'm going to go down the coaching route and set myself a target of getting my UEFA Pro license, which was at the time probably about 6-7 years away. So I said, obviously finances as well. You go from a decent paid job to a not so decent paid, however it looks, and you're sort of using your savings and all that kind of stuff. But I knew I wanted to stay in it, and I thought for sort of a short-term sacrifice, the longer-term goal is obviously to stay in football until obviously I don't have to work anymore. So we sort of sacrificed that, if you like, and then after 5 years, I got my pro license. So I'm obviously the highest coaching qualification that you can get. But during that time as well, I've had a number of different roles in football. So I'm a European scout now. So I'm abroad most weekends, most weeks. I'm a UEFA coach, UEFA Pro License coach. I'm assistant manager at Connah's Quay in the Welsh Premier League. So I've got 4 or 5, or I have had 4 or 5 different roles. But I'll look back now and people say, oh, you were mad, you should have stayed in football. There's players playing till they're 38, 39. I wouldn't have been able to play to that level or to that age because the injuries I had. Some mornings now I struggle to get up and walk because my knees are shot at. But that's just the way it is. So, I'm glad that I made the decision when I did to go into coaching because, I think if I hadn't have done it then, I'd have probably never done it.
Yeah.
Is there, as a professional footballer though, and you do that thing that you love for so long, even though you will know yourself, my body sort of, all these injuries are sort of taking their toll now, and I'm sort of at that point. But is there still that sort of urge to go, do you know what, if I drop down a couple of leagues, maybe I could get another year or another 2 years, or, is there still that sort of...
I mean, when I finished playing at Wrexham, I ended up playing in the Welsh Premier League for Carnarvon.
Yeah.
Wayne Phillips was a manager up at Carnarvon. I went up there for about 18 months, and I got to be honest, I thought, it's just going to be so easy, this.
Yeah.
But it was far from it, because obviously you're not playing with players that you have been playing, so it becomes more difficult for you. You don't train every day, you train maybe once a week, so then you become unfit. You don't sort of take it as serious as you would if you're a professional footballer. So all of a sudden you've gone from being and dedicating your body and yourself to every single day being the best that you can, to being a bit of sort of half-hearted, if you like, and thinking you can get away with it 50% and you can't. So it was a bit of a rude awakening, because I thought, it's going to be easy, this. I can play in this league till I'm 40, dead easy. But I couldn't, because I just wasn't doing things like I had been doing for the past 20 plus years.
Yeah.
So it became difficult.
If you were to have your time again, is there anything that you would change?
Yeah, I would certainly work harder, 100%. I probably had an opportunity, certainly at Liverpool, where I could have worked harder. And again, like I said to you before, certainly in the first 6 to 12 months, I could have worked a lot harder, not so much in training or in games, but my free time, to say that I was last in the training ground, I was first out. And really, as a footballer that wants to succeed, you can't do that.
Yeah.
You've got to be dedicated, and you've got to put the hard yards in. And looking back, I didn't. I did work hard. Don't get me wrong. I wasn't one that never worked hard, but I could have worked harder, certainly.
Is that the professional footballer mentality there, though? You probably did work really hard, but when you look back, you think, oh, if I'd have just done that little bit more.
And again, the difference is at the time, and again, the culture of football's changed now to what it was years and years ago. So now when, I know, for instance, for Liverpool, so Liverpool will play in Europe on a Tuesday night in the Champions League. If they're playing at home, they'll finish the game at 10 o'clock. They go straight to the training ground. So they go straight to the training ground and they do a recovery session in the pool, and they'll have a massage and they'll have a sauna and they'll do all the rehab stuff. That's an hour after the game. My first thought was, right, let's go to the pub.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just my first thought. That was the culture at the time. It was, and everyone was doing it, and everyone was doing the same thing. But sort of as my career sort of evolved, if you like, and again, go back to Darren Ferguson, when I was at Wrexham during the end of my career, Darren Ferguson would be in the gym after training for about an hour, stretching off. And I'd be looking at him thinking, what's he doing? Why is he doing that?
Yeah.
And I'd be upstairs, I'd be having my dinner, and I'd be in the car and gone home before, and he was still in there for a good hour. But that was the kind of professional mentality that he had. And if you think about it, Fergie, I think, played till he was 36, 37.
Yeah.
Which is obviously 5 or 6 years longer than me. But you look back now and you think, well, if I'd have done that, perhaps I'd have been able to play to that all until I was 36, 37. So, things change over time, and but certainly there's certain things that I wish I'd have done different, but I don't have any regrets, don't get me wrong,
What do you think about the whole Rob and Ryan thing, the whole takeover thing, that little thing that's happened?
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. I mean, obviously the WST had come in and saved the club, but I think the club was never going to be in a position where it would have ever got back in a football league. For all the will in the world and all the sort of good work that they did, it was going to become stagnant there, and I've seen it at different clubs that I've worked in, and it was never, they would have had to have a massive slice of luck to ever get back in a football league, whereas now you've got basically everything that you want. There's a feel good factor. There's 10,000 peers, a sellout every week. There's the new cop's going to go up. You just look. Not that I've been to the stadium recently, but you look on TV and look at the stadium, the advertising boards, everything's changed. You look at the infrastructure of the club is slowly but surely becoming better and better. It's got a chief exec. It's got an advisor in Sean Harvey. It's got 2 owners that aren't scared to put their money in their pocket if they need to. That's fantastic. The crux of it is you've got better players. You've got players like Paul Mullin, Ollie Palmer, Luke Young, Hayden. They shouldn't be in the conference. They'd hold their own comfortably in League One, some possibly even higher in the Championship. So you've got better players playing against players who aren't as good. That's why Wrexham are top of the league. It's not so much because of it's not all the money. They've got better players now, and they've got a better squad. And that hopefully will see us over the line this year. But, I've got to be honest, my personal opinion is that they'll get promoted this year. They'll get promoted next year, and they'll be in League One within the next 2 to 3 years. I've seen clubs go through and League Two to Conference is absolutely no difference. There's a small difference in League Two and League One. There's no reason why Wrexham can't go through 2 divisions in the next 2 years.
I completely agree. I think if this is indeed our year and we do go up, I think we've very much got everything in place to be pushing for promotion that next year as well.
Yeah, and again, the infrastructure as well. I think that, to be fair, the only thing that the club's missing really is a home in terms of the training ground.
Yeah.
Again, I think over time, they're a bit nomadic, and they've been down to the Groves, they've got Lex, they've been Colliers, whatever it might be. They've been everywhere. And I think once the club gets back into the Football League, I think you'll see that side of the thing being developed then. The ground's being developed, the new training ground, a new sort of hub, if you like, for everything. And then hopefully, I've worked in it, hopefully they'll bring the Centre of Excellence back in, or an academy, which will then obviously produce and bring a production line of players. Because don't forget, these owners aren't going to be around for, for 30, 40, 50 years.
No.
They're going to be around for maybe 10, 15 years, 20 years, however long it might be. The club needs to make itself sustainable between now and the time that they leave. That when they do leave, they've got a production line of players that they can put in the first team, they can sell, and they just continue making the money. So, but hopefully by then they'll be in the Championship, maybe a little bit higher.
Lee, thank you very much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much.
We really enjoyed that.
Yeah, it was amazing. Loved it.
Thank you so much for tuning in, and we shall see you next week for another episode of Me, the Wife from Wrexham AFC.
Bye.